So you found a potential clinical supervisor. Great. But how do you know they're the right fit for you? In this video, I'm going to share with you 10 key questions to ask during your consultation to determine if this clinical supervisor is the right fit for you and your career. Make sure you subscribe to get more tips on building your career as a therapist. The first question I would recommend asking is, what is your supervision style? There are some clinical supervisors who are very structured and directive. There are other clinical supervisors who are very reflective and collaborative. So it's important that you find a clinical supervisor who aligns with the way that you learn best. Do they provide structured guidance, or do they have more of a relaxed approach? This also can change depending on where you are in your stage of being a therapist. So for myself, when I started out, I definitely needed a structured approach because imposter syndrome, being all over the place, just being so uncertain about so many things, structure really helped me. As I got more and more into the field, this is my 10th year. I will be dropping a video on all the reflections, all that stuff later on. But as I got more into the field, having a clinical supervisor or checking in with a clinical supervisor who had more of a relaxed approach was more appropriate for me. So consider the stage that you're in within your therapist career, and that can also help you determine, do you want someone that's a bit more structured, or do you want someone that's a bit more relaxed? The second question that I think is important to ask is, what theoretical orientation do you use? Now, this is super important because if you're looking for a clinical supervisor that offers CBT and the clinical supervisor that you're speaking to mainly focuses in psychodynamic therapy, it will not necessarily be a good fit unless you want to learn about psychodynamic therapy and they have the skills and the tools and the strategies to best support you with learning a new modality. Then finding a therapist in that modality would not make sense for you given where you are and what you actually want for yourself. If you're interested in couples therapy and you want to know more about Gottman therapy, you have to make sure that that therapist, that clinical supervisor, aligns with your needs. The third question I think is important to ask is, what experience do you have in my area of interest? If you're interested in working with children, if you're interested in working with different levels of trauma, if you're interested in working with couples, it's important to understand the experience and the type of experience that clinical supervisor has in those areas of interest. The fourth question is, how do you offer feedback? Again, there are some clinical supervisors who are very structured. And then there are others who only offer feedback when you specifically ask for feedback, and that might not necessarily work for you. So again, it's important to understand how they offer feedback, what offering feedback looks like to them, how comfortable they feel offering feedback. Are they supportive and empathetic and understanding in the way and the approach that they take when offering feedback? Those things are super important for you to know because you need to know if that works for you. Remember, you are the one that is interviewing these clinical supervisors. It is not an interview for you. They are the ones that are supposed to support you and guide you and assist you on this journey of you being a therapist. And so don't be intimidated or fearful of asking specific questions because you are the one that is paying for this as well. You are the one that is fleshing out the money to cover these clinical supervision costs. And it's important that you get a clinical supervisor that aligns with your needs and what works for you. I'm going to say that again. It's important for you to get a clinical supervisor that aligns with your needs and how you learn. The fifth question that I think is important to ask, just so you have an understanding, is, do you offer individual supervision as well as dyadic or group supervision? Now, having one-on-one sessions could be really helpful for you to just get sole attention and sole focus on your clinical aspects or needs that you have, but it could also be helpful to be in a dyadic setting or a group setting where you can get feedback from multiple perspectives. So it's not only the clinical supervisor that you get a perspective from or feedback from, but it can also be colleagues within your field, and that could also be another way that you build your network of colleagues, which can be beneficial in the future when you start your private practice or a group practice and you're trying to get referrals as well. Again, we will talk all about that in future videos in my upcoming series about building your therapy career. But there are benefits to having individual one-on-one clinical supervision and group or dyadic clinical supervision. It's important to understand if this clinical supervisor offers a variety of approaches, so individual, dyadic, or group. So you could learn for yourself, hey, what really works best for me? Do I learn better in a group environment, or do I learn better one-on-one? Or does it depend on the type of client that I'm working with or the cases that I'm working with? And testing those out can be helpful. You can also have a clinical supervisor that you do one-on-one with, and then another clinical supervisor that you do group sessions with. It really depends on your needs, depends on what your regulatory body requires, or if you're just doing this because you do ongoing clinical supervision just because, which I think is important as all of us therapists do still need support. It's helpful. So determining, hey, what style do I like, is super important, and understanding the approaches that they offer so that you can make the best decision for you and also for your pockets, because let's be real, clinical supervision is costly as hell. If you're enjoying this video so far, make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for future tips on building your therapy career. In regards to the sixth question, I think it's important to know how a clinical supervisor handles ethical dilemmas. It's important to have an understanding of the feedback that they would provide you, how they would go about navigating that situation, because it will make you feel more confident in the training that you're getting. And especially if you're a newer therapist and you're not as familiar with the guidelines and possible ethical dilemmas that could come up in your clinical practice, it's important to have someone that also feels confident and secure within their ability to offer you ethical support around therapeutic situations. And let's say that you have a private practice or you're interested in building a private practice, maybe considering how do they handle ethical dilemmas when it comes to the business practice as a therapist, because that is a whole other ballgame and a whole other concept that you have to understand. And it's important to have a clinical supervisor who can support you with that if that is the space that you are in. The seventh question I recommend asking is, what are your fees and what are your payment policies? It's important for you to understand how costly this is going to be for you, because clinical supervision tends to be an ongoing relationship. And also, it can never hurt to ask if they have discounted rates. And at that point, they may also say, hey, we have a group supervision coming up at this time. That would be the most affordable way for you to get your hours if needed, or for you to get that support. And so understanding their fees, pricing, policies can clarify things for you to see, hey, is this a good fit for me? Because cost is also a way to determine if a clinical supervisor is a good fit for you or not. Question 8, what is your availability? I feel like this question is often forgotten, and it's super important because sometimes you might need clinical supervision for 1 hour a week, sometimes you might need it 3 hours a week, and sometimes that could vary. And you have to make sure that the hours that this clinical supervisor has aligns with the availability that you have to meet the requirements that you have to meet for your regulatory body, or even just to make sure that you're meeting the requirements so that you can offer the best support to your clients. Question number 9, to be honest, is like an interview question, but it is essentially an interview. You are paying for their service, and I think it's important to ask, and it is fair to ask, can you provide me with referrals to past or current supervisees that you have? Getting this information can be helpful. Reaching out to those supervisees, 1, is another way to build potential network, and 2, it helps you understand, hey, is what this clinical supervisor saying and what the supervisee is saying, does it actually match, and does this still fit what it is that I am looking for? Getting other references, getting other people's perspective on their work with the clinical supervisor, especially being at the same stage that you're at or being at a different stage that you're at, can be very helpful in understanding, is this person a good fit for me? There are so many questions that you can ask a clinical supervisor, but for the sake of this video, the 10th question I would recommend you ask is, what is your approach to professional growth? Does this clinical supervisor support you with career planning? Do they work with you beyond what it is required for your licensing requirements? Can they support you if you want to build an online business or a therapeutic practice in person? All of these things are super important to understand and ask and learn about to see if this person can really support you throughout that journey as a therapist. Understand that a good supervisor just doesn't help you meet certain requirements. They actually are invested in your growth as a therapist. Asking the right questions can make the world of a difference in finding the ideal clinical supervisor to support you with your professional growth as a therapist. If you found this video helpful, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more helpful videos on building your career as a therapist. And make sure to watch the next video that I have where I go into detail about finding a clinical supervisor. I'll see y'all in my next video. Bye.